وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Honorable Dr. Ossi Azeji, Assistant Professor of History and Civilization, our honorable speakers, Associate Professor Dr. Shaza Shukri, Dr. Muslim Imran, and Dr. Firas Ali, lecturers, and my fellow friends, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome to the seminar of Israel's Massacre against Gaza. My name is Aiman, and I will be your master of ceremony for this event. Before we begin, let's open our event with Kitab Al-Fatiha. Alhamdulillah, praise be to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are still given the opportunity and extended life, able to participate in this seminar and make dua for our brothers and sisters who are currently fighting in Palestine and other parts of the world. We hope and pray that they will stay strong and win in the battle against the enemies of Islam, inshallah. Before we start the main agenda, I would like to give a brief introduction of our panelists today. First, we have Dr. Ossi Azeji, Assistant Professor of History and Civilization of IWM. Dr. Ossi will be presenting on what is Netanyahu planning to do with the Palestinians. Next, we have Dr. Muslim Imran, Senior Non-Resident Scholar at Hashim Sani Center for Palestine Studies, University of Malaya. He will be discussing on Al-Aqsa Flag Operation, or geopolitical analysis. Then we have Dr. Firas Ali, Senior Research Fellow at AMEC Palestine Studies and Lecturer for International Policies at Zamin University Malaysia, who will be presenting on Malaysian foreign policy on Palestine-Israel conflict. Finally, we have Associate Professor Dr. Shaza Shukri, Head of Political Science Department of IWM, and the topic is the failure of normalization with Israel and future implications. Without further delay, I would like to invite Dr. Ossi Azeji to conduct the discussion of Israel's massacre against Gaza. Please welcome, Doctor.
Thank you for the presentation. Assalamu alaikum to everybody. We are organizing this panel discussion today in order to discuss the latest Israeli massacre against Gaza. And the question that probably many of us have is what is Netanyahu planning to do with the Palestinians? As many of you probably know, on October 7, 2023, the Palestinian Islamic Resistance Group of Hamas launched a military operation against Israel. And this operation, which was launched on October 7, was one of the most successful ever operations that Muslims and Arabs have ever waged against Israel since its inception in 1917, when the British defeated the Ottoman Empire, and with the infamous Balfour Declaration, they initiated the creation of the Zionist state. Israel has made a number of wars with the Arabs: the war of 1948, of 1956, of 1967, and 1973. From its creation in 1948, Israel, which has been armed to the teeth by the British, the French, and the Americans, have been quite successful on beating the Arabs, terrorizing them. And the Arabs, who since 1948 have technologically been inferior to the Jewish state, they have almost always been defeated. But what happened on October 7, it was a great surprise, not only for the Arab and Islamic world, but for the West as well. Hamas managed to break the siege of Gaza, to kill over 1,000 and 400 Israeli colonies, and to take over 200 prisoners. The war of 2023 was a major breaking point in the history of the Jewish state. Hamas broke the myth of Zionist supremacy over the Arabs. The attack of Hamas against Israel came on the 75th anniversary of the creation of the Jewish state. However, the rocket attacks and the urban warfare which Hamas brought to Israel shocked the Jewish state. Until October 7, all the wars that Israel has waged against Muslims and Arabs were waged in enemy territory. But what Hamas made on October 7 is that it brought the war within the Jewish state. For people who follow Jewish media, who interview Jewish settlers, in this moment that we are speaking, they know that there is a massive panic in Israel. The majority of the Jewish population of Israel is not Zionist. Probably 80% of people who today live in Israel, they are simply immigrants. Majority of them, immigrants who in 1990s, when the Soviet Union collapsed, they left their countries like Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, Poland, Romania, Bulgaria, Albania, ex-Yugoslavia, and they simply immigrated to Israel to have a better life. The reason why many Jews from Eastern Europe moved to Israel after 1990s, it was not because they believed in the myth of the Zionist state, but because for many of these Jews it was simpler, and many of them are not even Jews for that matter. There are many people with Muslim and Christian origins who in 1990s they faked their documents proclaiming or claiming to be Jews in order to have an easy way out from Eastern Europe. But what happened on October 7th has created a major chaos within Israel. There are thousands of Jews in this moment, or Israelis for that matter, who are simply abandoning Israel. Those of you who follow Russian news, a few days ago, you probably saw what was happening in Massacre, the capital of the Russian Republic of Dagestan. There are hundreds and thousands of Jews who in this very moment, they are abandoning Israel and they are going back to their home countries. The surprise attack and defeat that Hamas brought to Israel has created a major shock in the mind of the Zionist rulers of Israel. The penetration by Hamas of the Jewish colonies of Nir Oz, Be'eri, Netiv Hasara, Kfar Aza, or even cities like Sderot, has shocked the Israeli public. They never have seen a war in their life. The only war that Israelis were used to see until now was a war that they were seeing on TV and cheering their army bombing the helpless Arabs, be them in Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, Gaza, or West Bank. Now, after the successful operation of Hamas, on October 8, 2023, Israel has started its counter-offensive. Israel has mobilized its 500,000 soldier army, and since October 8 to today, November 1st, the Israeli regime is simply bombing and massacring Gaza. For those who follow the news, you have probably seen that as of last night, up to 8,500 innocent Palestinian civilians have been killed. Israel is being backed by the United States, United Kingdom, Germany, and the European Union on its massacre against Palestinians. Israel has been given the green light to simply massacre and mass murder defenseless, innocent Muslims and Christians of Palestine for the only reason because these people are not Jews. Israel is an apartheid state. Those who have visited Israel and Palestine, you know very well what happens in this country. If you are a Jew, you immediately get your citizenship, you have full rights, you can receive funding from Western governments, you can even claim to be a Holocaust survivor, and your life will be a paradise. But if you are a native Muslim or Christian of Palestine, and you happen to live in the occupied Palestine, be it the state of Israel or the occupied territories of West Bank or Gaza, you are forced to live under an apartheid regime. Now, what is Israel doing since October 8th? Israel has launched a massive attack against defenseless Palestinians. People who have followed the declarations of the Polish origin Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu has declared that the mission of Israel in this moment is to turn Gaza into rubble and to destroy once and for all the Palestinians. In one of the speeches that Netanyahu held before launching the military operation against Gaza, he compared the Palestinians with the Amalek. The Amalek is a biblical enemy of the Judeans, which in the book of Samuel, the Judeans are ordered to go kill, attack the Amalekites, to totally destroy all that belongs to them, to not spare any of them, to put to death their men, women, children, and infants, cattle and sheep, camels and donkeys. What Israel is doing now in Gaza is it is following its biblical commandment against the Goyims. According to extremist Zionist ideology, non-Jews are not considered to be humans. The non-Jews are considered to be Goyims or animals. The Israeli Defense Minister, Yoav Gallant, when he launched his military operation against the Palestinians of Gaza, he called the Palestinians human animals. So, for the Israeli state, the Palestinians, the Muslims and the Christians are not considered to be human beings, but we are perceived to be human animals. And with this ideology, the Polish origin Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant declared that Gaza will have no electricity, no food, no water, no fuel. Everything will be closed. The ideology that the Israeli regime is using at present to massacre the Palestinians is not different from the ideology of Daesh. When Daesh or ISIS was going and slaughtering innocent Christians and Muslims in Syria and in Iraq and claiming that who doesn't follow Daesh, he does not deserve to live. But unfortunately, for what Israel is doing at present, it has the full support of the West. The big question that we have here is that what is Netanyahu planning to do with the Palestinians? The attack against Gaza has opened a multi-front war against Israel. After the collapse and the destruction of the Ba'athist regimes by the Americans after the fall of the Soviet Union, the destruction of Iraq, of Yemen, of Sudan, of Libya and Syria, Iran has built a so-called axis of resistance. Different militias from Iraq, Syria, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Houthis in Yemen, are supporting the Palestinian Islamic resistance and Hamas. In this very moment, Israel is facing a multi-front war. Israel is being attacked by the Islamic resistance of Gaza, by Hezbollah in Lebanon, by Houthis in Yemen, and by the Islamic militias of Syria and Iraq. So, what Israel is doing at present, Israel is in a panic mode. The Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, declared that this war against Gaza aims two things. Number one, the total destruction of Hamas. And second, Netanyahu has declared that this is our second war of independence. Why is this a second war of independence? Simple, because today, 75 years after the creation, the Israeli state understands that it can no longer exist in the Middle East. Israel has lost its demographic game against the Arabs. Today in Israel and in the occupied territories of Palestine live 7 million Jews and almost 7 million Arabs. So what does Israel want to achieve with the latest massacre against Gaza? Is a number of secret documents which were released in the past days by the Israeli newspaper Haaretz. The plan of Netanyahu is to force 2 million Palestinians of Gaza to flee towards Egypt. Netanyahu wants to find a final solution against the Palestinians. This final solution will be ethnic and religious cleansing of historical Palestine from its Muslim and Christian inhabitants. Nevertheless, history will show if Netanyahu will succeed or if the Muslim and Christian inhabitants of Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, and other Arab countries will prevail against this fascist regime. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ossie, for the presentation. Now I would like to invite Dr. Muslim Imran to deliver his talk. Please welcome.
A very good morning to you all. I'm very glad to be here in IIUM after a long while, in the very faculty where I did my master's. I'm glad to be here. But of course it's mixed feelings because we are gathering at a time when Israel is massacring hundreds, probably thousands of civilians. The number of children massacred by Israel over the last 3 weeks has exceeded 3,500. 2,500 school children and another 1,000 toddlers and babies. Of course, the total count of deaths is beyond 10,000. Many are still under the rubble or their bodies have been completely wiped out. With the kind of US-sponsored bombs that Israel is dropping on Gaza now, we are losing whole neighborhoods in seconds. But I won't be talking much about this humanitarian crisis. I will try to focus my attention on the geopolitical dimension of what is happening. And I know it's hard, especially for a Palestinian actually, to try to freeze our emotions for a minute and focus on the impact of what is happening. But before talking about the geopolitical impacts, I would like to zoom out of what happened on the 7th of October and try to put things in proper context. Something that Western media, for instance, doesn't try to do. If you see interviews taking place on CNN, BBC, and these are still mild ones, see the ones on conservative media agencies like Fox News or some of the podcasts in the US, for instance, they don't even have a place for the Palestinian narrative, not at all. So these media outlets don't try to put things in context. The Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, said in one of his speeches that the situation that happened on the 7th of October in Israel did not happen in a vacuum. So there was a context. And the context is, in simple words, an ongoing colonization. The Israeli occupation of Palestine is only a phase of a long period of colonization that started more than 100 years ago with the occupation of Palestine in 1917 by the British, when the Ottoman Empire collapsed. This occupation became formal through a mandate over Palestine, and eventually the British facilitated the creation of Israel in Palestine. For 30 years, from 1917 until 1947, the British administration of Palestine, which was entrusted by the League of Nations to administer Palestine for a few years until the inhabitants of Palestine are capable of ruling themselves. This administration facilitated the creation of a foreign colonization, a foreign occupation in Palestine. So over 30 years, so tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of mainly European Jews migrating to Palestine, picking up arms, organizing themselves, establishing state institutions, and by 1947 they started a process of ethnic cleansing, a genocide that led eventually to the creation of the State of Israel. So this is well documented now by even Israeli historians like Ilan Pappé, Avi Schlein, or many others. They call it the ethnic cleansing of Palestine of 1947-1948. Within a year or a year and a half, Israel was able to kick out 750,000 Palestinians from historical Palestine, to wipe out almost 500 Palestinian towns and cities, some big cities and some small villages, and to establish a new political regime in Palestine called the State of Israel. The Western powers eventually endorsed this occupation and sponsored its armament, making it one of the largest militaries in the Middle East, if not the whole world. And since 1948, all the way until October 2023, Israel has emerged as an expansionist colonial regime that practices, in addition to colonial policies, apartheid on its subjects and the people it occupies. Let's deconstruct this label. Israel is an expansionist regime. It started as a small occupation, occupying 80% of Palestine, but eventually started to seek more territory, to annex more land, and to try to impose its hegemony over the region. So in 1956, as Prof. Olsi has just mentioned just now, 1956, they tried to expand their territory. They occupied Gaza and parts of Egypt. In 1967, they expanded further. They occupied parts of the rest of Palestine and parts of Syria and Egypt. Of course, they took over the West Bank from Jordan as well. In 1973, they went to war with Arabs, but apart from the political settlement, it was basically status quo. In 1978, they occupied parts of Lebanon. 1982, they occupied half of Lebanon, including the capital city of Beirut. In later years, they were not able to expand territory, but they started to enhance their annexation and occupation of the territories that they already have. So the West Bank, over the last 30 years, saw rapid expansion of Israeli settlements. And this brings us to the colonial part. Israel is an expansionist regime, but it's also a colonial regime. It's a settler colonial regime. Unlike many occupations where the foreign invaders come for resources, for influence, for control, and probably stay in certain parts, in cities, in coastal areas. Israel is a settler colonial project, similar to that French colonization of Algeria once, or the white colonization of South Africa. The Dutch, when they came to Indonesia, for instance, they occupied mainly coastal areas. That's why if you go to Indonesia, you see the fortresses, the colonial architecture in places like Batavia and in coastal areas. The British, for instance, when they came to Malaya, they did eventually occupy the whole territory, but at first, you look at their colonial architecture, you see it in Penang, in Singapore, in Kuala Lumpur. Later, they went deep further in the Malay heartlands. The Israeli colonization is different. They come, they destroy, and they build their own settlements. They want to take over and stay. So they repeated what the white European colonizers did in North and Latin America. In North America, and this actually explains a lot in the sociological dimensions, it explains why the British, the Americans most particularly, are okay with the genocide that's taking place in Gaza. It's nothing new to the Americans, to the American empire. This is how America was established, but probably long ago, so people forgot. This is how they established their own state. They wiped out the Red Indians. They built new settlements, so the new settler colonial groups came over, built their own civilization over the dead bodies of the original inhabitants. The same applies to Australia. In Palestine, Israel started as a colonial regime. Until today, they continue expanding their settlements. And if you see the news, when the Qassam fighters attacked the Israeli settlements in the neighboring areas of Gaza, you would wonder why the Palestinians still call these settlements. Because they are settlements actually. Since the Israeli colonization started over 100 years, or 140 years ago, they started all the way until now, they've been building their own Jewish-only settlements, separating them from the whole surrounding. And in fact, even architecture, there are even studies on that. Even their architecture is distinct, different from the local architecture. The way they build houses, the way they build their communities, isolated from the local population. Because they came with the claim that this is a land without people for a people without land. I won't delve further in this larger context, but Israel is an expansionist, settler colonial project in the Islamic heartland, in the Arab heartland. It serves imperialist goals. This is why European and North American nations are comfortable with what Israel is doing, because it helps further their hegemony over the Middle East and the larger Arab and Muslim world. But Israel is also practicing apartheid policies. So it started as a settler colonial occupation that serves Western imperialist interests. It also expanded its territory and regime. It also built huge military capabilities, pursuing the dreams of one of their earliest Zionist thinkers, Jabotinsky, who suggested that we have to have an iron wall. An iron wall literally is an iron wall. The Jewish communities in Medina, for instance, if you visit Khaybar or you visit Medina, used to have really high fortresses. But in Israel, they didn't take it literally. They still are building walls. There is the separation wall in the West Bank, and they are building a wall also with Gaza. But they thought of building a superior military power, so big, so powerful that their enemies won't even think of attacking them. A huge wall. This was crushed on the 7th of October. So this settler colonial expansionist regime has been practicing apartheid policies as well from day one. Not very different from the apartheid policies that were practiced in South Africa. In South Africa, it was based on color or ethnic background. In Palestine, it's based on religion or cultural background. So if you are an Arab, a Muslim or a Christian Arab, or even a Jewish Arab, you are looked down at, you are discriminated against. If you are a Jew, you are more superior. If you are a Western European Jew, Ashkenazi Jew, you are still more superior. You see, even African and Asian Jews in Israel have a problem. Even Arab Jews in Israel have a problem. Even Eastern European Jews, and Western European Jews still have a problem with each other. But anyway, this apartheid regime formalized their policies in 2018 in the Nation State Act. Israel doesn't have a constitution, they have enactments. So they relegated the level of the Arabic language into a secondary level. They made it illegal to raise a Palestinian flag, for instance, in any Israeli institutions, etc., etc. If you visit the West Bank, you will know what I mean by apartheid. I believe Dr. Olsi, I'm not sure if anybody else has visited the West Bank. In Gaza, it's a different scenario. It's a small Palestinian territory isolated from the whole world. They built walls, they cut it off from the whole world, they control who comes in and who goes out, they control what food supply we get, what goods we import and export, they control our communications, they tap every phone call in Gaza, etc. So this regime is, in addition to being a colonial occupation, is also practicing apartheid against the Palestinians. This is the larger context. This is why the 7th of October happened. This is why many other 7th Octobers will happen if occupation and apartheid don't end. So there is a way out actually. The way out is to dismantle apartheid and to end occupation, to allow the 7 million Palestinian refugees who have been expelled from Palestine during Nakba in 1947-1948, to allow them to come back to their homelands, to allow the people of Gaza to live freely, to allow the people of the West Bank to live freely without over 300 to 500 military checkpoints all over the place. I was speaking to my aunt from the West Bank. I was speaking to my sister yesterday. She wanted to go to Ramallah, we're from Hebron. It's like 200 kilometers, maybe, I think less. But she said, I can't. There are so many checkpoints because of the situation now in Gaza that you cannot go anywhere. My parents have been able to visit Al-Aqsa Mosque, I think like 2 years ago, after 20 years of ban. You know how far is Al-Aqsa Mosque from our hometown, from my place? It's like the distance from here to KLCC. It took them 20 years to visit Al-Aqsa Mosque to pray. They are Muslims and they are elderly because of Israeli restrictions imposed on the Palestinians. So with these kind of restrictions, of course the Palestinians will think of 7 October, 8 October, there will be so many 7th of October. Now let's come back to what happened on the 7th of October. Let's zoom in again. 3 days before 7 October, Israel bombed Syria, killing 100 government officers. 100 government officers. A few days earlier, Israeli settlers, who are state-sponsored settlers, of course, they get, they almost get everything from the state. They get salaries, they get homes, they steal our homes and hand it over to them. They were spitting at Christian congregations in Jerusalem. Palestinian and foreign Christian congregations who were practicing their Christian rituals in Jerusalem city were being spat at by Israeli settlers under the protection of the Israeli police, of course. At the same period, Israeli Jewish invaders and settlers were storming Al-Aqsa Mosque on regular basis. They had some celebration called Eid al-Arsh, the English was Hebrew name, where hundreds and sometimes thousands of Israeli settlers enter Al-Aqsa Mosque, desecrate it, walk around, practice sometimes rituals or celebrations or whatever. Since the beginning of this year, 250 Palestinians were killed in the West Bank. So almost one person every day. 30 of them are children, little minors, extrajudicial killings. The Israeli military officers in the West Bank shoot to kill. Like, they see the Palestinians are sitting ducks and stuff. Sometimes they actually had games. I grew up in the West Bank during the first and second Intifada, and I still recall stories where Israeli soldiers will compete. They will have a game, like who can shoot more today. Or for instance, we will have a lucky draw. They will stop a group of Palestinians, capture them, and have a lucky draw. What do you get? You get beaten up. You get shot at. You get thrown out of the military jeep while it's running fast. This is a daily experience that we have in Palestine. Anyway, few days before 7 October, all of this was happening. So 7 October was going to happen. And Israel is, of course, occupying the whole Palestinian land and besieging Gaza, installing huge military capabilities around the Gaza Strip. Almost 14 to 15,000 soldiers of the Gaza command in Israel, they call it the Southern Command, stationed in areas, in Nahal Oz, in all over these settlements which were attacked. And they have built a huge military power, so powerful that they felt so arrogant to think that the Palestinians are incapable of doing anything because of this iron wall theory. They thought that we are already powerful, we have the technology, they received $3.8 billion of American military aid every year. And this was endorsed by Obama, by the way, the supposedly good American president. He granted Israel $38 billion over the course of 10 years, so they received $3.8 billion of military aid. That's almost about the Palestinian GDP, you know. They received weapons as much as all of our economy, in addition to many other assistance to the Israeli state. So they have so much military capabilities. They have special forces, they have Gab'ati, Golani, this and that. They were sleeping. Many of them were just sleeping, or even having a music celebration next to Gaza. I can't imagine how despicable a person can be to imprison people, 2 million people in a small piece of land for so many years and go have a music festival next to them. But anyway, on the 7th of October, the Palestinian resistance, which has been working very hard to build its own resistance capabilities, attacked Israeli military sites in the envelope of Gaza, in the areas around the Gaza Strip. And for a few hours there was fierce fighting, but eventually the Israeli Southern Command crumbled, like a house of cards. So the 15,000 soldiers were shattered, and the Palestinian attackers were less than 2,000. Now there are redundant reports whether they were 1,200 or 1,800, even if they were 3,000. Within 6 hours, the Israeli Southern Command of 15,000 soldiers in so many military sites was either killed, captured, injured, or ran away. Of course, the Palestinian fighters found Israel collapsing. They marched on to some of these settlements where the Israeli armed settlers live, but they observed the Islamic teachings, of course. They did not harm children. You check the names list of the deaths in Israel on Haaretz, for instance, the Israeli newspaper. Not a single baby. But of course, Israelis used to play the role of victim. They started to cry over the Palestinians, baked the baby, the Palestinians beheaded 40 babies, and until now they haven't showed a single picture of any of that, because these are Muslim fighters, they're not going to do that. They tried to draw similarities between Hamas fighters and ISIS fighters. ISIS is illegal in Gaza, by the way. It has killed Palestinian police officers. It's considered a terrorist organization in Gaza itself. So there is a real difference between the two. This is a national Palestinian National Liberation Movement running the Gaza Strip, elected by the people of Gaza, living with its own people, trying to liberate Islam. And that one is a universalist jihadist group that is out there to get everybody. So on the 7th of October, the military attack resulted in a serious shake in the Israeli self-confidence. And until today, they are still getting ready to invade Gaza. They started 3 or 4 days ago their ground invasion of the Gaza Strip. But so far, the fighting on the ground, as we receive news, shows that Israel is unable to control 1 kilometer square in the Gaza Strip after almost a week of fighting. Every time they try to storm, they are faced by fierce fighting. They lose soldiers as we speak. And the response is similar to what started on the 7th of October. The more casualties they have in the battlefield, the more civilian deaths they cause. When the 7th of October happened, Israel needed a face-saving measure. So they started unleashing hell on Gaza. They started total massacres and genocide of the Gazan civilians. The numbers that I mentioned earlier, the almost 10,000 Gazans and 3,500 children are apparently civilians. Bombing a hospital will certainly result in civilian deaths. But of course, 1 or 2 days earlier, Israel has to justify what the crime is going to happen, and they will say, under this hospital there is a military command for Qassam brigades. Then they bomb the hospital. Neighborhood, this morning, last night, they bombed a neighborhood in Jabalia. In Jabalia camp. 70% of the people of Gaza are refugees. They belong in the places where they attacked on the 7th of October. They were coming home on the 7th of October. 70% of the people of Gaza are refugees, living in very crowded refugee camps, including this Jabalia refugee camp in Gaza. It is literally the most dense place on earth, Jabalia refugee camp. You cannot walk between buildings. They dropped 6 tons of bombs, American-sponsored, American-made bombs, wiping out the whole neighborhood. So if you want to imagine the size of the disaster, let's say Mahal Ali, I live in Mahal Ali, but it's not very dense though. Imagine 6 tons of bombs being dropped in the central area on the hostel. You see the pictures coming out of Gaza? It's not, in the beginning there were many destroyed buildings. Now there is a big hole in the ground. Do you know what was there in this big hole? There were big 10-story buildings, 8-story buildings. There were big buildings. I visited Gaza once, and I saw what these bombs do. They just wipe out the whole thing. It's like with crack or something, you wipe out everything. So many dead bodies are lost actually forever. You will not get any body parts because everything is gone. Anyway, Israel's response to its military and security failure on the 7th of October has been a total madness, because the international community is complicit. The Western world is okay, as long as it's their bad guy, let them do whatever they want to do. They have been killing civilians in large numbers. They will continue to do so. In Israel's mind, it makes no sense to have 1,500 Israeli casualties and a similar number on the Palestinian side. It has to be 1 to 10, 1 to 15. In some of the previous encounters, it was 1 to 27. 1 Israeli casualty, 27 Palestinian casualties. So don't be surprised if the number of the Palestinian casualties shoots 15,000, 20,000, 30,000. That's exactly what a genocide is. You're killing, mass shooting. It's like when somebody carries a gun and enters a hospital or a school and starts shooting everybody. This is what Israel is doing. Let's look at the larger context, geopolitical context of this. Who panicked when the 7th of October happened? Of course, Israel did panic, but somebody else panicked further, more. Uncle Sam. The United States showed real concern, real panic about the situation in Gaza. Why is that so? It's because of the shock that the global hegemony has faced. Remember, a few months ago, there was a military coup in Niger. Before that, there was one in Burkina Faso, another in Mali, and the end result in the global world order was that the French were just chased out. The hegemon in the Sahel area, the French, will keep that. I believe the American decision makers, when they saw what happened on the 7th of October, this was coming to their mind. The Middle East, unlike other regions, is an American territory. Okay, let's talk politics, political theory. The way I see world politics is very similar to what the realist school portrays world affairs. If any of you is a political science student, you know well that there are different theories of international relations: realism, liberalism, constructivism, etc. Within the realist school, there are different versions. The most recent one is the offensive realism, which proposes that states seek absolute hegemony for survival and further progress. So the main proponent of this theory is Professor John Mearsheimer from the United States. So according to this analysis, the world is in a way in different blocks, organized. The world, the countries of the world, the regions of the world are different blocks, or umbrellas, or pyramids, or triangles. If you look at South China Sea, for instance, there are two superpowers competing for hegemony here. What are they? The South China Sea? US and? China, very clear. So you see countries like Philippines, clearly on the American side. Countries like Laos or Cambodia, Myanmar, clearly on the Chinese side. They might have differences, but when it comes to international affairs, you are either here, or you are in the middle. Malaysia is in the middle. Malaysia is neither here nor there. It's hedging, trying hard to stay neutral, which is very hard, of course. In the Middle East, there isn't such bipolarity. In the Middle East, there is an almost total American hegemony. Whoever challenges the American hegemony will be knocked out. We saw what happened to Saddam Hussein in Iraq, knocked down. We see what's happening in Syria and Yemen, in Libya. They couldn't replace it with a regime that is 100% under the American hegemony, so destroy the whole nation. Countries like Algeria are silent, but the rest are actually on the American side. The rest, their foreign policies go in line with the American foreign policy. So before the Arab Spring, they used to call the countries that are in line with American foreign policy in the region the moderate camp. Media used to call them moderate camp, or I would say status quo camp. Many Gulf states and other states. There was a small challenge to this total hegemony by countries like Iran. Iraq, we said, was eliminated. Syria is down. So Iran and a few non-state actors like Hamas in Gaza, which is a government in Gaza, but in the larger context is considered a non-state actor. Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, some militias in Iraq, and so on. The total American hegemony on the 7th of October was shaken. They saw that their military outpost in the Middle East, Israel, which has been their main ally, which has been the main warranty for an ongoing American hegemony in the Middle East, they saw it beaten up, humiliated, its security undermined. So the Americans came and stepped in themselves. And this is good and bad, of course. The Americans are actually now on the ground. They send Delta forces, they send their own troops to Gaza, they send their warships, 2 warships in the Mediterranean, East Mediterranean. They have a direct lifeline of weapons, ammunition, and the goods coming to Israel, unfortunately, from many Arab states. Americans have many military bases all over the Arab world, so some are as close to us as Jordan. Those who saw the interview of the Queen of Jordan, I don't know if any of you saw it on CNN, it was just beautiful. But what would be more important and more useful than that nice interview is actually telling her husband, can you please stop the American B-52s and fighter jets from flying to Gaza? I don't want to start naming names because this will mean it will be my last program in UAE, but this applies to many Arab and Muslim governments in the Middle East. It applies to many. You hear very nice speeches, but action on the ground is embarrassing. Anyway, to come to a conclusion, what happened on the 7th of October, despite the disastrous massacres and genocide that's taking place in Gaza, is and will continue to be a real mind-changing development. And this is what the American analysts are saying now. People like Dennis Ross, the Zionist former American ambassador to Israel, is saying what happened on the 7th of October is actually going to persuade many Arabs and Muslims that Israel can be defeated militarily. For so many years, Arabs fought Israel and lost. So they came to some sort of a conclusion that you cannot defeat this nation. It's too powerful to defeat. And of course, some other countries in the Middle East didn't even try to fight Israel in the first place. But now, after 7 October, if 1,200 soldiers can do this to Israel, imagine what 100,000 soldiers can do to Israel. Imagine what a concerted effort of different Muslim nations with real power can do to Israel. So the time when Israel used to knock down 4 Arab armies in 6 hours is over. 1967, Israel's Air Force carpet bombs Egypt's airports and military sites, and that's it. 6 hours they took over Sinai, Golan Heights, they took over everywhere. That is history. As we speak, Israel is unable to take over an inch of Gaza. There was one video of an Israeli tank that entered actually to the street. It's because if you check the map, I don't know if any presenter will show the map, Gaza is really small. Gaza is 365 kilometers square. I'm not sure, I don't want to give wrong comparisons, but I think it's half of Singapore. I think it's a little bit bigger than Oman, Gaza, with 2 million people. So of course Israeli tanks can enter, but those footage are actually at the border areas. There are some agricultural lands, tanks run. Fighters in Gaza, the spokesman of the resistance, Abu Ubaidah, issued many videos during the war. In one of them, I think 2 days ago, he clearly says, please come in. We want you to come in. Because Israeli soldiers coming into Gaza will seriously face one of few fates. Either they'll be killed, this is happening as we speak, or they'll be injured, paralyzed or injured, or they will be captured. And Palestinian fighters in Gaza are not fighting to kill actually, they're fighting to capture. So there is a nice video online, if you saw it, for a little pig entering a small pond full of crocodiles. That's exactly what Gaza is now. The people of Gaza who are losing thousands of their family members, they are just waiting for these Israeli soldiers to come in. And they are not going to go out safe. That's why Israel's ground invasion plans are a total mess. That's why they rely on the Americans to help them in their operation. And that's why this development is very important. It is a big shift in our minds, the whole world. I'll close with this. What happened on 7 October should actually open our eyes that we are not that weak in the Muslim world. We are not hopeless. Imagine if a small territory with a small population and a small armed force like Gaza managed to bring down Israel's southern command to its knees in a matter of hours. What can the whole Muslim world do? We can do a lot. It's just that we probably need to work on our leadership, on our capabilities, to build our capabilities as Muslim nations, economic, military, and other capabilities. We have to improve our national institutions, of course, political, we have to achieve some sort of political consensus and unity. We can do a lot. And this is what the Western imperialism doesn't want to see happening. This is why they are all over the place in the Middle East, and if they have a chance to come all over the place here in Asia, they will come, they will certainly come. Let's try help our people in Gaza in whatever way is possible. This is not the first battle, it will not be the last battle. We pray for our brothers and sisters in Gaza, inshallah, to survive this. And hopefully after this war is over, it's time all of us can start working on a different future, inshallah, for the whole Muslim Ummah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Muslim Imran, for the interesting insight on Al-Aqsa flat operation, for geopolitical analysis. Now I would like to invite Dr. Feroz Ali to deliver his topic on Malaysian foreign policy on Palestine-Israel conflict. Please welcome.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Olsi for inviting me. I'm humbled by the invitation, and also I must admit the talk by Dr. Muslim Imran has been really interesting. I got a few insights, especially when you mentioned that Delta forces are also in cooperation with some of the Israeli forces. From here, we can understand the close cooperation between the two parties. And also, you did mention that Gaza is about 367 square kilometers. I think that is about the size of Penang Island. Can you see that? So it is very small. It's a very small place. So it is crowded as well. So the incursion by Israeli will face a lot of issues over there. Now, let us go straight into my topic of discussion. The focus of my discussion will be about Malaysian foreign policy on the Israel-Palestine conflict. There are at least three objectives that I intend to cover this morning. For objective number one, we are inclined to look into the first few policies from 1957 onwards. The second objective will be looking at the new policies that is from millennium onwards. And okay, can you guys hear me? Okay, the first policy will be looking at the areas that Malaysian government produced after it achieved its independence from 1957 onwards. The second part will be about newer policies from millennium onwards, and finally we are going to dissect some of the challenges that Malaysian foreign policy is facing up to this point of time. Okay, during the first few years after Malaysia achieved its independence, its focus of foreign policy has not been entirely about the Middle East, rather it is about its own national security. It is only logical because we are a new and young country, and there is also communist insurgency within the context of Malayan jungle. So these are some of the areas where Malaysian foreign policy should look into. Now, there were also instances where during the period where such policy is not in existence, there were attempts by Israeli diplomats to establish some form of communication with the Malayan government during that time. And during that period, Tengku Abdul Rahman has been one of the key personalities where the Israeli government have been trying to get in touch with. One of the first few diplomats, that Israeli diplomats that got in touch with Tengku Abdul Rahman was this person by the name of Moshe Yegar, who got in touch with Tengku Abdul Rahman through an event, that is through a potential football event. Moshe Yegar is the third secretary of the Israeli embassy in Myanmar. So these are the first few modalities of communication where the Israeli embassy or the Israeli government attempt in trying to build some form of bridge with the Malayan government. Now, of course, there was a paradigm shift in 1967 when the Arab-Israeli war occurred, or the 6-Day War. News about massive exodus of Palestinians outside of their original territory, and we get a lot of news about massive killings of innocent civilians and also famine. So this type of news made its way to Malaysian newspapers, notably the New Straits Times. So New Straits Times was reporting a lot about this issue, and sooner or later this type of news got into the Malaysian parliament. So there was a debate in June 1967, and there was two outcomes from it. Number one is that the Malaysian government condemned and labeled Israel's action as a form of atrocities on the innocent Palestinians. That's number one. And number two, there was also a pledge to formulate pro-Palestinian policies from there on. So what you got 2 years after that, that is 1969, is the first attempt from the Malayan government to actually establish or invite the Palestinian Liberation Office to open its first office in Kuala Lumpur. That was in 1969, and in few years after that, in 1978, the Malaysian government began to contribute funding to the United Nations Refugees in West Asia, or UNRWA, on yearly basis. So that is some of the first few policies, pro-Palestinian policies, that has been initiated from 1969 onwards. Now, in 1983, the Malaysian government upgraded the status of the Palestinian Liberation Office from a basic office into a diplomatic organization. So when there is a shift from an average office to a diplomatic organization, there are a few things that also changes. Number one, those staff that work in the office will be given the status of a diplomat, and they will receive certain privileges, including diplomatic immunity, diplomatic passport, and etc. For the Palestinian embassy in Malaysia, Malaysian government has been sponsoring most of their expenses in terms of what we call their transportation, the maintenance of the building, the payments of salaries to their staff. This is what the Malaysian government has been giving to them. We are fully funded to them. And in one way or other, this shows our diplomatic form of solidarity to PLO and the rest of their officers over in Jalan Ampang. Okay. Now let us look into some of the newer policies that are in place. So some of these newer policies became really obvious from 2006 onwards, and one reason is because of the blockade of Gaza. During the blockade of Gaza, there was a rise of humanitarian issues. There was a lot of people that were facing shortage of food, medicine, water, and others. The only actor in Malaysia that have access to Gaza are Malaysian NGOs, and the reason is because they are quite close to the Hamas government. Therefore, the Malaysian government saw this as an opportunity to liaise with them and to get all the money, food, water to Gaza through Malaysian NGOs. So, with that development, the Malaysian NGOs, the Malaysian Foreign Ministry started to use Malaysian NGOs as their partners to deliver aid to the region. Now, the second new policy that started to emerge is our policy on the Hamas and Fatah conflict. So that is these two new policies. Okay. So let us try to dissect into the policy of providing humanitarian assistance via humanitarian NGOs. This policy, as I've mentioned earlier, is a direct outcome of Malaysian NGOs having access into Gaza. Therefore, Malaysian government utilizes that form of dynamic to get its aid into the region. Let me illustrate a very simple example. That was back in 2009, where the Malaysian government decided to distribute nearly 10.5 million to 14 NGOs. Of course, from 2009 up to 2012, there have been a lot of other types of assistance that the Malaysian government have been providing to NGOs, notably in 2010, where it was during the period of Najib Tun Razak. where he pledged nearly 11 million to mitigate the disaster that occurred in the region. And one way is to provide money to different NGOs, and also to second some of the responsibility to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to coordinate the humanitarian work. So some of the areas where the Ministry of Foreign Affairs have been engaging with is through inviting different NGOs, Malaysian NGOs, to sit with them, to discuss, to get ideas on areas where these Malaysian NGOs think that can be important for the Palestinians in Gaza. So once this aspect has been cleared, the Malaysian Foreign Ministry will ask what we call that the amount that is needed. So from there, money will be accorded based upon the cost of humanitarian projects that has been proposed by Malaysian NGOs. The Malaysian Foreign Ministry also will look into any excess money, and they will also inform some condition for the return of the money to other purposes once the project ends. Okay. There are a number of NGOs in the past where the Malaysian Foreign Ministry have been liaising. That is one, Yayasan Amal, Muslim Care, Mercy, and Global Peace Mission. Yayasan Amal and also Muslim Care are two NGOs affiliated to Parti Islam Malaysia, PAS. Yayasan Amal has a very big complex in Bani. That is for your information. Okay. There are at least 4 to 5 clusters where Malaysian government and also the Malaysian NGOs have been cooperating with. There are basic humanitarian necessities, medical help, education for children, and microcredit help to small-time entrepreneurs to ensure that they are able to, start their business at a positive footing. Okay, our next policy, which is the new Malaysian policy, pertains to the Hamas and Fatah conflict. Now, Hamas and Fatah, just to give you a little context, they are two Palestinian factions. If you would compare to Malaysia, it is something like between UMNO and PAS. That is, a very basic description on how the factionalism works. And the context of Hamas and Fatah occurs back in 2006 to 2007, where there was an election in Gaza. Hamas won the election, Fatah was not happy, and what ensued from there on was fight between the two. Fatah was defeated, they were chased out from Gaza, and up to this point of time, Hamas has been ruling the place in Gaza. And that is the basic history of what Hamas and Fatah is all about. This is a very basic representation of where Hamas and Fatah administer. Well, Hamas administers at the very narrow strip in Gaza, and Fatah administers the West Bank. The map of West Bank is not really an accurate description of what West Bank is right now, because as we have understand, there are various small incursions made by Jewish settlers in West Bank. So for the sake of our understanding of where Hamas and Fatah is located, so I hope this map will be suffice. Okay. Now, Malaysia has diplomatic relations with Fatah. We, as I've mentioned just now, Fatah has been represented by PLO office in Jalan Ambang. We don't have an official relationship with Hamas. We have a friendly relationship with Hamas. We, policymakers, do engage with Hamas officials in a very cordial manner. We have an unofficial, what we call Hamas office in Kuala Lumpur. So that organization acts as a way of communicating between the Malaysian policymakers and also with some of the activists in the organization of Hamas. The key point here is, what is Malaysia's point of view on the Hamas and Fatah conflict? The main prevailing mindset among Malaysian policymakers is that Hamas and Fatah need to reconcile their differences. The reason is because without a united Hamas and Fatah movement, it will make the formulation of policies towards achieving Palestinian independence hard. So it will complicate the matter. So in most policy book of Malaysian policymakers, oftentimes you will see how the wordings is being described in a way to emphasize unity between the two factions. What are the challenges to the policies? There are at least a number of challenges. They are in existence at this point of time. Number one is Malaysia's passive role in addressing the Hamas and Fatah factionalism. Now, despite Malaysian policy makers' keen interest to want to see Hamas and Fatah coming together, the irony of it is there is not much of an interest within our context to look into ways how to unite between the two. Now, Malaysia is no stranger to the process of mediation. We have had experience in mediating both in southern Thailand and also southern Philippines. The question is, can we utilize this form of collective experience to bring Hamas and Fatah to the negotiating table? So that is one area to be considered, which we, up to this point of time, have not been doing. Perhaps one way is to also collaborate with Qatar. Qatar is active in trying to bring these two parties into the negotiating table. The second dilemma that we are facing within our foreign policy is the proactive approach towards diplomacy. Now, there are various approaches to engaging in diplomacy. One of it is not only merely through United Nations or other international organizations, it could also be done through direct lobbying. One aspect that is yet to be explored is the potential lobbying of US Congress by Malaysian diplomats. This is possible, and it is not illegal if a party intending to lobby the Congress inform the US Justice Department. As a matter of fact, this is what the Jews have been doing for a very long time, which we have not explored. Malaysian diplomats can explore to lobby US congressmen and congresswomen, especially those who are friendly towards the Palestinian cause. There are a few, such as Rashida Tlaib and etc. Now, let me relate also an experience. I used to work with the British High Commission or British Embassy. Most of their diplomats engage actively not only with Malaysian diplomats, which are their counterparts, but with different NGOs. They engage aggressively with Malaysian parliaments. They do research on the list of Malaysian parliaments that could be friendly to their cause. And from there on, they target specifically who are the parliamentarians that could be receptive to their overall objective. Now, the question is, can we replicate the same thing in other big cities, such as United States, UK, in Brussels? So this is a food for thought for our foreign policy makers. Now, let me relate another narrative. I have had chance to meet with Dr. Made in 2021 when I was in the process of finishing my PhD, and I've asked a question that's related to our discussion, and that is, can Malaysia reform its foreign policy? Now the question is, do you think Malaysia can produce a new foreign policy, white paper on the Israel-Palestine conflict? His answer back in 2021 was, the Malaysian government cannot, since they are too focused on domestic politics. The current government has a small majority, and their concentration is rather to consolidate power, so much so the Palestinian issue is marginalized. So he is referring to the previous Muhyiddin Yassin's government. As we are aware, the government is quite shaky at that point of time. Now, does his answer apply to the current context that we are in, that is under Anwar Ibrahim administration? Now, the answer is complex, it's up for debate, but one aspect that we need to keep in mind is Anwar Ibrahim is a leader with complex relationship. He is not only with the Islamists, but he is also quite close with Western policymakers. So how that form of dynamics impact the way he thinks and the way he make decisions pertaining to Palestinian-Israel issue, and maybe on issues, other issues pertaining to the broader Islamic world. So with that being said, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Firoz Ali, for the comprehensive presentation on Malaysian foreign policy on Palestine-Israel conflict. Now, I would like to invite Associate Professor Dr. Shaza Shukri to deliver her topic on the failure of normalization with Israel and future implications. Please welcome, Dr.
Thank you. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everyone. Okay, I think this should be fine. Firstly, I would like to say that I'm honored to be invited to this talk, even though I mentioned to Dr. Muslim, I don't know what I can contribute because they have contributed a lot actually. So in a way, I'm always happy to be the middle or the last speaker because they have laid the groundwork. It's always the case. When I'm the middle or the last, I'm like, hey, so I don't need to talk a lot. So I can just focus on what I want to mention today. Thank you, Dr. Olsi, Dr. Muslim, and Dr. Firoz. All of them have talked about things that I cannot have in what I have prepared. In terms of the domestic politics in Israel right now, geopolitics. Dr. Muslim talked about geopolitics. I feel like I'm done already because it's basically what I'm going to talk about as well, about the US. And Dr. Firoz's conclusion is somewhat kind of similar to what I guess my conclusion would be. My conclusion is somewhere of a mix of Dr. Firoz's and Dr. Muslim's conclusion. So just let's start with that. So the reason I chose this topic, normalization, and I stress on the fact that it's a failure. We can discuss and debate about that. Because we can't escape talking about the Palestinian and Israeli conflict without talking about the United States. Right? That's just a fact. And now that I'm looking into the sea of, not sea, I'm looking at students here. I see some of my students. I want to apologize if this might be repetitive from class, but I promise that I bring it to context to what we're talking about here today. So speaking about international relations is important. That's what I'm trying to say, right? For me, the three main players of my talk today is obviously Israel and Palestine, America, and also the larger Muslim world. Because that is where the discourse is right now, right? What are we doing and where are we going? So let's start with a bit of very brief history, but like I said, I don't need to actually, but I just want to talk about the wars that have already been mentioned by Dr. Olsi and Dr. Muslim. We had the 48-49 war. So when I say the war, I'm talking about Israel's war with Arab nations. Why do I stress this? Because when we talk about normalization, we're talking about normalization between Israel and Arab nations. So to understand Israel's relationship with Arab nations, so let's look back at how it was. So during the war, the independence war for Israel and the Nakba to the Palestinians, so obviously we had this contentious war between the two sides. I mean, we don't have to go into the historical details. So in a way, Israel won, in a way, right? They had independence. They extend their territory from the 47 UN partition. Transjordan got West Bank. Egypt got Gaza. We had the 56 war between Egypt and Israel. 67 war, obviously, the 6-day war, like Dr. Muslim said, Israel won as well. And then the 72 war, Yom Kippur war, it's a big mix, right? Both sides say they won. Okay, so from that 73 war, and then something happened in 1978, which is that Egypt became the first Arab country to recognize Israel. So now they have official relationship with Israel. So I have to stress this because when we say normalization, this is not something that happened 3 years ago. Okay, we've had this already. 78, the late President Anwar Sadat went to the Israeli Knesset to speak to the so-called parliamentarians. So we already had a kind of official diplomatic relationship between one Arab nation with Israel. So nothing new. Fast forward to 93. In the 90s, we had the Oslo Accord, signed in 93. Again, just a brief recap that the end of that period was supposed to be a 5-year interim period, whereby at the end there will be a more permanent settlement between Israel and Palestine. They put aside, discussion on Jerusalem, too complicated. But anyway, the idea was that by 1999-2000, we shall have something more permanent on these two states. It was a two-state solution was proposed. That was 93. So what happened the year after, in 94, Jordan became the second country to establish relationship with Israel. So again, we've had this in our history. Nothing new in 2020. So that's up until 2000. So there was a brief period of optimism in the 90s that something could be done. But when we look at history, we know it was never genuine. It was never genuine on Israeli side to abide by the agreement, if we call it that. And then when 2000 happened, like I said, nothing came to fruition. They had the Camp David trying to work on that again. Nothing came out of that. We had the second Intifada, which made things worse between Israel and the Palestinians, and therefore the wider Muslim nation. And then we had 2006. Dr. Phyllis already talked about that. The election, Hamas won. Fatah and Hamas break up, right? And then Hamas is in Gaza, and the Americans, Israelis are not happy about that. So that's where we are now. Since then until today, that's where we are. Meaning that Israel and the United States, and therefore their allies, the wider Western world, are not happy with Hamas in Gaza. So it is a continuation of that. Like Dr. Muslim said, that is the context when 7th October happened. It doesn't come out of a vacuum. So that's just to lay the groundwork on the historical part. It is organized by the history department anyway. So I thought I should do justice to that. So now we go to the normalization. So when we say normalization, we're talking about diplomatic official relationship. The thing is, Israel already had economic relations with these Arab countries and the wider Muslim world, we can say. It's done under the table because it's still taboo, right? In the Muslim world, it's taboo to talk about, oh, we have economic relations with Israel. We can't say that, but it's there, it's done, but not on a diplomatic level. If I may say, Dr. Phyllis may correct me on this, it's the same with Malaysia as well. We have a way around it that we have economic relations with Israel, but not diplomatic relations. So in 2020, what happened under Trump was President Trump of the United States. I don't know if he led, but it happened under his presidency, the Abraham Accords, What is the Abraham Accord? The signing of diplomatic relations between America with the UAE and Bahrain. And then a few months later, Morocco followed suit, Sudan followed suit. This is important because what we've been talking about, a lot of things here happen or don't happen with or without America's support. So that's the important part that we need to remember. The last attempt by America towards a peace settlement was in 2014 by John Kerry, who was the Secretary of State under Obama at the time. That was the last, kind of last ditch effort. And then America realized it is not working. We've been trying, I might say, since President Carter's time in the 70s, trying to find a solution. That was the first Camp David anyway, and they couldn't find a solution. So what happened during Obama's time was they shift. They say, you know what, after 10 years fighting in the Middle East, we're going to shift our attention where? To our part of the world. So American had this shift. They focus on the Indo-Pac region, our side of the world, economy and whatnot. They shift away from the Middle East. So that was the context. So Trump, if you guys remember your American politics, 2020, he was facing a re-election. He was campaigning for re-election. And it was during Trump's presidency that we had COVID-19. And if you remember what happened a few years back, American mismanagement of COVID-19, how many people died because of wrong and late decision by the president, by the administration. So it was bad, situation was bad. So Trump was facing re-election in 2020, he needed a big win. What can he do to get votes by the American people? If I can solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict somewhat, he would be a hero. He was actually expecting a peace prize actually out of this accord, but because nothing came out of it. So that was the thinking. If I can do something. I mean, this is politics lah. At the end, it's just symbolic. You can show I did something. So they had the Abraham Accord, a big clap for the administration. UAE, Bahrain, like I said, and Morocco, Sudan normalized relations with America, diplomatic relations. Speaking of Morocco, actually this is a re-normalization. Morocco also had a low-level diplomatic relation with Israel actually. And then after 2008, I think, the Gaza flotilla tragedy around that time, so they stopped relations and now they restart again. So it's just a continuation of things that have been done. Why are they going for this normalization when related to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict? So this is the problem. To the Americans, I hope you guys can follow me, to the Americans, they say that this issue or this conflict cannot be solved because the Arab world cannot accept Israel. As simple as that. Or because the Arab world or the Muslim world again, right? We cannot accept Israel. And because of that, this can never be solved. They fail to think of all the contexts that have been laid out by our three speakers earlier. You know that this is an occupation, this is a settlement, colonial settlement problem. It's an occupation, basically. They don't see that. They just see, it's all because Muslims don't accept us, we cannot do anything. So because of that simple thinking, they say, okay, now let's get them to be friends. So that was the idea. So let's get them to have this normalization. Maybe then we can solve this problem. And that is where I go to my argument, which I said, that's why normalization failed. Right? Because it's not as simple as that. It's not just be friends, it will be done. Because that was part of the justification by these Arab nations that when we ask, when people ask, why you're normalizing, why you're having this relationship with Israel, they said that if we are in contact with Israel, if we have diplomatic relations, we can somehow make sure Israel doesn't annex the West Bank, doesn't annex Palestine, doesn't have more incursion, basically they say that if we are in touch with Israel, there will be stability. That was the argument from the Arab nation side. But we can see clearly there was no stability. It's not just 7th October. So Abraham Accord 2020, 2021, just 2 years back, I think it's still fresh in our mind what happened during Ramadan. 250 people died. That was just like a few months after the signing of the Abraham Accord. So it was clear as day already, this is not going to work, this is not going to solve the conflict. 2022, last year, Israel had an airstrike supposedly to kill leaders of Islamic Jihad. Same thing, they killed civilians, right, at the end. So there was no stability, that was the idea. So that is where my argument is, it failed. I forget to mention why, right? Why these Arab countries want this relationship, and this is key actually to what happened today. One of the reasons that they want this relationship in Israel, there are two actually. First is of course Big Brother. They want Washington to be on the good side of Washington. Right? That's why I say we can't think of this like thinking of America. They want to be on the good side of America. So if they are friends with America's ally proxy in the Middle East with Israel, then they feel it will be better because America, as we know, is the current major power, the hegemon. So they want to be friends with America, number one. Number two, they want Israeli technology in terms of surveillance, weaponry, it's technology, right? Israel is known for that. Why do I say this is an important point? Maybe I can bring it here, even though I put it somewhere else. What happened in 7 October, just like Dr. Musi mentioned, we saw that Israeli technology military failed. In a way, you're telling me you have such a good military, you have such a good technology that you want to give to the Arab allies, but you cannot foresee this happening, that's supposedly been planned. Your response was slow. What was going on here? So why do I say this is important? So we need to think, do we still need normalization with Israel just to get the technology if they can't use the technology to protect themselves? So do we need their technology now? So that's what I want for you guys to think of. So the next one I have is about the negative impact. I mentioned this supposedly to solve the issue but did not solve, supposedly to stop annexation, but the fact is it was already annexed in a way, de facto. West Bank is already, it's not just occupied. Someone here mentioned, I don't remember who mentioned about Fatah is administering West Bank. Yeah, you said it, right? Yeah, administering, but they don't have sovereignty, right? Whatever it still goes by the Israeli military. And now, under Netanyahu, it's not just military, he has transferred those power to the civilian authority as well. So we see there's no such thing as a dual two-state solution to the Israeli. They really want to take over Palestine. And they made it clear, earlier this year, if I'm not mistaken, Netanyahu made a remark that they are on the way to annex Palestine. So again, normalization did not stop that. So what is the point of having this normalization? Stability, I mentioned, okay, the Arab public. So this is the part where it gets a bit interesting for me. If you think about it, and I relate it to the point about Malaysia, because we talk about Malaysia, why is it that these countries have this normalization with Israel? Because if we look at data, the Arab Barometer does this all the time, Arab people, the masses, don't want normalization with Israel. They are against this. Like 90% says no, we don't want our government to have relationship with Israel. Very clear. In all of the Arab countries, 80 to 90%. But these countries go ahead with it. Number one, like I mentioned in class to some of my students, I can see here, that is authoritarian government. As an authoritarian government, they don't need to listen to the people. So if you contrast this to Malaysia, Dr. Rose talked about Malaysia just now, any government in Malaysia cannot have a relationship with Israel because we are somewhat of a democratic country. Our government have to listen to the people. If we normalize relationship with Israel, no more government tomorrow. As simple as that. Right? We cannot. But these countries can because they don't depend on elections. Having said that, at the end of the day, if you study politics, governments still need legitimacy. They still need people's support. So if the people don't like what the government does, it's going to be a problem. So another thing about why normalization is going to be a problem. Okay, now I want to talk about the American response. So this is where, for me, this is where I am optimistic, because whenever I talk about international relations, we cannot avoid talking about domestic politics. This is just how it is. So if you want to understand why America is doing what it is, you have to look at the domestic politics. I think we are all aware of, okay, the elites are controlled by this network of Jews, both in America and outside of America, in Israel. So when I say the elites, I'm talking about the people in Washington, congressmen. Someone mentioned the media just now. The media controlled by this network of influential Jewish people and organizations. It looks bleak. At the moment, it looks very bleak. But where I am optimistic is, if we look at some data, the American public's support for Palestinian cause has increased. It's not that much, but it's increasing. We see the trend. It is increasing. A lot of the Gen Zs, the young generation of Americans now, they are on the side of Palestine because they are aware of, social justice issue, right? So they are aware of what's going on. This is an occupation. We cannot support this. So the number is not a lot, but the trend is there. So for me, this is where we need to keep on working. So I like Dr. Feriz's final comments when he said maybe we can work with Congress, work with the people there, because we see these are the people that are going to vote for the congressman later on. So we can work on that. And it's not just in America. Data has shown even in Europe and even in Israel. It's just saying that people have fled because I don't want to go into the Israeli politics, but Bibi Netanyahu's government now is a right-wing populist government that is not supported by a lot of the people. A lot of people don't like his style of governance, but he's there. He has won after 5 elections in 2-3 years. So we see this trend of people are going towards the side of Palestine, but it's just that the elites are still there. That is where we face these limitations. Okay, I have some time left. Let me just talk about the last 2 things I want to talk about. Saudi Arabia, because this has been in the news about Saudi. What will happen? Will it normalize relation with Israel? In the past few months, if you follow the news, yep, it's moving towards that. Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince, have hinted is moving there towards normalization with Israel. But 7 October kind of cut that deal. So if we think about it, why does President Biden of America is trying so hard to get this normalization deal with Saudi Arabia? It's almost the same as Trump, same story over and over in politics. Next year, Joe Biden will face re-election. So the same thing, if he can win over the Saudi deal, this is a major win for him. But the question of, will Saudi go there? It doesn't look like it. Because of what happened now, Saudi has to, take a stand and say they're against Israel, the massacre, the people, etc. Okay, so my conclusion, I have a few. Number one, obviously, diplomacy normalization didn't work. We see that the normalization with Arab countries didn't work. So my question, not to you guys, I guess if there are others out there watching, is it wrong for Hamas to use resistance? Because diplomacy so far had not worked. So can we really blame them for choosing this other option, this other method? Okay, that's my first point. My second point, the Abraham Accord, which is what the normalization is called a new Middle East. But the Abraham Accord, if you realize, is imposed by America again. So the new Middle East is another form of neo-colonization by America. It's what the West want. It's their version. They want their friends to be friends with Israel. So it's like the Middle East is never truly free or sovereign. Okay, China. So Dr. Muslim thought that America is still America's playground. Yes, I mean Middle East is still America's playground. But China is there now. Okay. So one of the reasons why Saudi doesn't feel the pressure so much for this deal is because if we can't get these things from America, we can get it from our closer neighbor China. And China's there in terms of economically, And the thing about China is they don't ask for political, maybe they do, but it's not as obvious as America. Right? It's just that China is just there to invest for their own benefit. So that is why, what I'm trying to say is there's no real need to normalize with America. Find other powers that we can be friends with. China's there, so we don't really need America. So final point is about Malaysia, just to link back. So like I said, we talk about international relations, we still need to think about domestic politics. So I've already said, in Malaysia, we will continue down the path that the fellow showed, that we will always be on the Palestinian side, no doubt, because the people is on the Palestinian side. It is political suicide for anyone to even talk about Israel, not normalization, just officially recognizing it's not going to happen. So my final conclusion is, it's a mix, like I said, of Dr. Muslim talked about realism just now, that we need to balance America's power and the West. Another thing about the normalization is, the reason they want to normalize with America is their bigger threat is Iran. Isn't it funny? The bigger threat to these Arab countries is another Muslim, albeit Shiite country. That is the bigger threat. Because of that, they're friends with America. So there is some realist perspective there, that we need to balance off these countries. But, to call for a small country like Malaysia to, I don't know, go in arms to Palestine, I don't think it's going to work. So that's why, like I said, it's not Dr. Feroz's suggestion. Let's take a liberal approach. We talk about international relations theory, liberal theory. Let's work, like you said, if not UN, bilaterally, economically, because, so people are asking today, what's going to happen to Malaysia now that, our Prime Minister just came out and said that he received threat, the 3D march that, the march that the Americans sent. I think, in the short run, there's going to be some friction in this short run. But if you take a longer term view, I don't think it's going to be a huge impact, because at the end of the day, when we talk about IR, economy reigns supreme. Malaysia may not be top in terms of trading partner to America, but we are not like nobody as well. So we are still working with all of the major players. So even though, like I said, it's not politics, it's not symbolic, rhetoric. They may say, America's not happy with us, whatever. Trust me, 10 years from now, we are still friends with them. So don't worry, so that's what I'm saying. It's good to be friends, because Dr. Feroz said just now, our current Prime Minister is complex, he said, because he's friends with everyone. I also said the same thing when he became Prime Minister. I was invited to talk University of Melbourne. I said the same thing, that he's friends with all. But I didn't use the word complex. I said this is an advantage to Malaysia, because he's friends with all and can talk to all. And in a way, he represents the Palestinian issue. Maybe he can use that, he can leverage that, maybe. So I'll end with that. Thank you so much. Sorry, everybody.
Thank you to Associate Professor Dr. Shaza Shukri for the interesting topic on the failure of normalization with Israel and future implications. Thank you to all the panelists for the valuable insights and discussion on Israel massacre against Gaza. Now I open for the Q&A session. If you have any question, please go to the microphone over there and you may ask any question regarding the topic. Please welcome.
A good idea, or like dismissal and denial of the struggle of Uyghur Chinese or Xinjiang people, like are we like really in the need to destroy American hegemony, or finding like balanced path or middle path? What is the probably like the solution in a way that we have to like weaken possibly the American hegemony, but not necessarily like destroying it, I believe. So any of the panelists can answer.
Okay, so I'll start with your last question. In 2018, I visited Palestine. Shukri, can you open my picture at the Canandia wall? So I visited, I passed through Israeli checkpoints, and Israelis almost killed me. So after coming from Israel and Palestine, I wrote a book, The Tale of Two States, Israel and Palestine is called. And I said there is no more horrible country in the world than Israel. But in 2019 I went to Xinjiang and I visited the Uyghurs. And after coming from there I said, oh, there is another place which is worse than Israel. So I mean, your question is right. I mean, should we, for the sake of our hatred towards the US imperialism, to go to the side of the Chinese? I think the answer is what the Muslim Brotherhood used to say, La Sharqiyya, La Gharbiyya, Islamiyya, Islamiyya. So there is no East, no West, there is only Islam. Unfortunately, I mean, Muslims nowadays, we are victims of imperial powers. I had the chance to meet the US ambassador here in Kuala Lumpur like two years ago. And when I met him, I told him, look, because of course Americans, they propagate against China, China against Americans. And I told him, look, you cannot propagate to us against China because look what you are doing to Palestinians. We Muslims who have to find our own solution. I mean, only we can save ourselves. I mean, what Americans are doing by supporting Israel is a genocide, is a war crime. But even what the Chinese did against Uyghur Muslims is really a genocide.
Thank you so much, Doctor. I'll try to touch on these 2 points. Of course, what Dr. Olsi said about having a Muslim homegrown superpower is the solution. We are being controlled by external powers because we are weak. Had there been a Muslim empire in the Middle East, for instance, or in the Arab world, or in the larger Muslim world, things will be very different. But this is not a reality right now. The reality is that there are different superpowers. The world was bipolar until the early 1990s, when the Soviet Union collapsed. The Americans controlled the world through a unipolar system. They were the main hegemon everywhere. Until the last few years, 2016, 17, the American hegemony started to decline and other major powers started to rise, like China and Russia re-emerging, of course. So we are looking at a new multipolar system emerging. A single hegemonic power is a problem, is certainly a problem, because you're actually under their feet. They decide. You look at the Western Hemisphere. Latin America is under a single hegemonic power. You ask the Latin Americans, they don't like it. They cannot do anything that the Americans don't like. And if they have any local, sovereignty groups seeking sovereignty, they will be crushed by the Americans. So many military coups in Latin America, so many changes of regimes because of the American hands. The Americans see Latin America as their own backyard. This applies to the Middle East. In the Middle East, we are facing a real problem that there is only one hegemonic power, the Americans. And the resistance to this hegemony is not local, unfortunately. It's mainly Russian. I mean, the superpower that is challenging the American hegemony in the Middle East is the Russians. It's not the Chinese, not yet. China has a small military base in Djibouti. They're first in the world. They have good trade relations with the Middle Eastern powers, but security-wise, it is America, number 1, 2, 3, 4, and maybe Russia, number 5. There are some local powers that are trying to challenge this American hegemony, like Iran. Iraq used to, and a few other powers, but it's not a good time for the people of the Middle East. It's one power deciding for you what to eat, what to wear, what to do, who runs your countries. Interestingly, I was checking a Telegram channel just now that has conducted a poll. There are about 11,000 people who answered this poll. The poll says, do you think Arab leaders are, 1, puppets controlled by the West, and they know that? 2, puppets controlled by the West, but they don't know that. Real sovereign leaders. 94% said that Arab leaders are puppets controlled by the West, and they know that. This actually explains the West decides who runs the countries of the Middle East. That's why I might disagree a bit with Dr. Shaz's rational analysis of the normalization issue, because rationality will not answer you. Thinking rationally will not explain what's happening in the Middle East. The governments of some rich, prosperous nations in the Gulf normalizing relations with Israel when they don't need Israel. They can get any of the technologies from anywhere with the money that they have. They have a leverage over everybody if they are independent actors. They are not independent actors. Most of the Arab countries are authoritarian regimes with leaders installed by the Americans. We remember the Arab Spring. There was some shaky situation for a few months in the Arab world. America quickly, as a superpower with its own plans, came and fixed things. So Morsi, for instance, was elected in Egypt. He wasn't really comfortable with the American hegemony. The Americans said, okay, goodbye, 1 year, that's it. If the same happens in any other Arab country, I'm very sure the end result is the same. So the solution for the Arab countries is to have their own homegrown power, to be their own hegemon. This is not happening. So let's deal with the reality. Bipolarity or multipolarity is certainly better than one hegemonic power. And you are lucky in South China Sea to have that. You are not controlled by one power right now. Malaysia, for instance, has the leverage to do hedging. Yeah, America is upset at Malaysia right now. But you can, simply, any Malaysian leader has the leverage to tell them, look, I also have interests with China. I have good business going on with China. Please don't pressure me too much. They will understand. So you have a leverage. We don't have that in the Middle East. No Arab country has the leverage. You have to pick sides. You either are installed by the Americans, controlled completely by the Americans, or you resist. If you resist, you will face what Hamas is facing in Gaza. Or you will face the sanctions that Iran is facing by the Americans. But it doesn't mean you have to give up and surrender. Because you can surrender, but if you surrender, as I said, they will tell you what food to eat, what exactly your life should be. This is what they are doing in almost all authoritarian Arab countries. Sorry for the long answer.
If I just can add something to add to what Dr. Muslim was saying. The empowering of China and Russia, even though we might hate China for whatever it does to Uyghurs, is not that bad. We have in the Quran, in Surah Ar-Rum, a story where even in the time of the Prophet, Muslims were very happy when great powers were fighting with each other. We have the Surah Ar-Rum, verse 2 to 5, where Allah mentions that there is an ayat where Allah says, the Romans have been defeated in a land close by, but after this defeat of theirs, they will be victorious. So this is about the clash of empires in the time of the Prophet, when the Romans were defeated by the Persians, but later they will defeat the Persians. So coming back to our present times, the empowering of Russia and China is something good. The reason why we're having the Palestinians being massacred today, but they were not massacred like this during the Cold War, was because we had Soviet Union. It was the Soviet Union who built the Muslim world. Iraq, Libya, Syria, Albania, Algeria, Yemen, Sudan, all were built by the Soviets. They armed the Arabs. The Israelis would not have been as arrogant as they are today if Soviet Union was to be around. So having only one gangster in the town is very bad. When there are two or more gangsters, is better because they fight each other. And after all, we have to understand that, look what is happening nowadays in Gaza. Palestinians are being massacred. And the so-called collective West, which lectures to us about human rights, is saying nothing about what is happening in Gaza. Israel is massacring. Israel has turned Gaza into a Dresden. Netanyahu is wiping out entire cities, and the West is saying nothing. If Soviet Union was to be around, the Soviets would have armed the Palestinians. Today, look what is happening, like Dr. Shahzad mentioned. We have only Iran who is supporting the Palestinians. Iran armed the Palestinians. Iran taught them drone and rocket technology because other Arabs, they simply accepted the defeat. The 1979 peace that Egypt had with Israel, that was the breaking point of the Arab resistance. In 2012, we had an advisor of Netanyahu who came to the University of Toronto, and he told us, look, the greatest victory that Israel achieved was the 1979 peace agreement. Because if there was any Arab country which could militarily defeat through a tank invasion Israel, that was Egypt. And the Arabs sold out. And look today what is happening to poor Palestinians. I mean, what is Hamas? It's an organized guerrilla. They're not even an army. And this is a desperate situation. And the rest of the Muslim Ummah were simply watching, making dua, sending some help and prayers. And that's it. It is very unfortunate. And this is the lowest point, but the situation of Muslims was not like this until 1914, when World War I started. Until 1914, we Sunni Muslims had our own caliphate, the Ottomans. For as long as the Ottomans were there, we had our core Muslim state. The Zionists couldn't do what they're doing, but they destroyed our caliphate. They turned us Muslims into our weak nation states, and this is the situation where we are in. Thank you. Okay, any other question?
Assalamualaikum. My name is Muhammad Firdaus. I'm from Kuliah RKHS History Department. So my question is, do you think this issue, this Israel-Palestinian issue, if it were to be prolonged in a long time, and if there are too many involvement from a major power, a country with a major power like United States, Russia, and China, and even more country involved in this issue, would it be another potential of an outbreak for World War III? Okay, thank you.
Our friends here should answer, but I'll tell you this hypothetical scenario that might happen. Because some people say the war is very far, it's none of our business. I heard that in a lecture with some Indonesian academics. They said it's none of our business, it's too far. There is an ongoing ground invasion in Gaza. Israel isn't achieving real victory, so they are committing massacres. As we speak, last night I think, or this morning, Hezbollah released a video of their Secretary General, Said Hassan Nasrallah, saying that you have until Friday, 3 p.m. to stop the genocide in Gaza. Yesterday, the Yemeni armed forces launched ballistic missiles to Israel. Unfortunately, of course, they were intercepted by the American military force in the Red Sea, and it's not a secret anymore, some missiles were intercepted by the Saudi Air Forces. So they protected Israel. If Hezbollah gets involved in this war, Hezbollah has a firepower that Hamas doesn't have, maybe 10 times larger than Hamas firepower. They have more armed fighters, they have better battlefield experience. They've been fighting in Syria for a decade. That means a big war in the north of Israel, a really big war, where thousands of Israelis will be killed. Maybe more will be killed on the Lebanese side. But if Israel couldn't take the killing of 1,400 of its soldiers and citizens, do you think they will accept the killing of 5,000 or 10,000 of their people? They might nuke Lebanon. That is actually a potential They have nuclear capabilities, of course, an estimated 200 nuclear warheads. They might just drop a nuclear bomb somewhere in Lebanon. Do you think Iran will stand still if this happens? If Iran comes in, do you think America will stand still? And America is sending warships not for Hamas. They're clearly saying that this is to Hezbollah and Iran, don't get involved. It will be a very big regional war. Like Ukraine will be nothing compared to what will happen in the Middle East. And of course, we are Muslims, they are Jewish, Americans are Christians. Everybody will start to recall their own religious scriptures and apply it on everything. You will see a lot of the Akhir Zaman prophecies, people. It will be a very big war. It will be a very big war if things develop in that course. That's why Americans should stop the Israelis. If they don't want that, they really have to put an end to the ongoing genocide. But if a global regional war breaks out, that means if you pay 2 ringgit for the petrol, the 1 liter of petrol now, it will be 5 or 6 or 7 or 10. It will affect everybody in the world. That's why it's in everybody's interest to actually stop Israel's genocide. Okay. This is just a hypothetical scenario that might happen.
I don't have much to add to that because I agree with that hypothetical scenario, but it's very plausible. That's the thing. I just a little bit of a joke. So maybe this is the time to change to electric vehicle. If you don't want for petrol to go up to 6 ringgit per liter. But yeah, going back to that question, like I said, it's very plausible that it's going to be a regional war. But the thing that I'm thinking as well, because right now we're just looking out for that, right? We're looking out for Iran and Iran's response, basically, especially now that the Yemeni Houthis are involved. But Russia has also, in a way, not pledged support, but Russia is on the side of the Palestinians. So it's not just a regional war. My fear is that if Russia gets involved, it's going to be a global war. Will it be a World War III? It might be too harsh to call it that now, but a regional war is definitely plausible, but we don't want that, of course. So that's it.
Well, according to my opinion, what we are witnessing today in Europe is probably, and in the Middle East, it's probably the beginning of World War III. If we go back to history, World War III didn't start overnight. It first started with the German invasion of Czechoslovakia, annexation of Austria, and we didn't have a World War III. We had local conflicts, but what is happening today in Europe, we have the greatest war that Europe has witnessed since World War II, and that is the war in Ukraine. And the war in Ukraine, we have the involvement of Iran on the side of Russia. Russia is using Iranian drones, Shahid, to bomb the facilities of Ukraine. And on the other hand, we have all the NATO bloc on the side of the Jewish-controlled Ukraine. The president of Ukraine and most of its ministers are Ashkenazi Jews, like is even the Secretary of State of US, Antony Blinken, or Benjamin Netanyahu. They are from the same tribe. So they are like, let us say, if the Secretary of State of US and the President of Ukraine and the Prime Minister of Israel to have all been from Lusantara. So there will be all Malays. So the people who today direct the West, from Israel to Ukraine to United States, they're the same tribe. They're white Slavic Jews, Ashkenazim. So we have a major regional war in this moment in Central Europe, the conflict over Ukraine, where NATO is openly involved against Russia. And then we have this regional war in Palestine, but as Dr. Muslim mentioned, if Hezbollah will get involved, and Hezbollah has the capacity to even invade, and Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah has even declared in the past that in our next war we're going to invade cities in Israel. And if this thing happens, even and according to biblical prophecies, the evangelical Christians, they believe that they will have the Armageddon. And in case of panic, Israel, as Dr. Muslim mentioned, is going to nuke southern Lebanon. So if something like this happens, then Iran will get involved. And these small conflicts that we have and wars, war in Ukraine, war Gaza, Palestine, in this moment Israel is bombing Syria, is bombing Lebanon, and these countries are hitting back. But if Iran gets involved, then we will probably have World War III. Because this is how World War II started. First it was the German invasion of Czechoslovakia, Italian invasion of Albania and Ethiopia, a German annexation of Austria, and then when you have the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact and the partition of Poland between Germany and Soviet Union, this is the moment when the Anglo-Americans, they decided to enter in war, and we had the outbreak of World War III. So, like Dr. Muslim mentioned, the reason why American warships are in this moment in the Mediterranean, they're not to fight Hamas. Hamas is just a guerrilla with RPGs and Kalashnikovs. They're there to fight the Arab countries, Egypt as well, even though Egypt has a peace treaty with Israel since 1979. If somebody follows with attention the declaration of the Egyptian President Sisi, Egyptians are very nervous, and they have openly refused Israel when the Israeli government wanted to deport 2 million Palestinians to Sinai. Abdel Fattah al-Sisi told to Netanyahu, send them to the Negev desert, not to Sinai. And Egypt has a major security issue with Israel. A few days ago, Israelis, they even bombed a military base, border point of Egypt. And after that, they issued an apology, and the Egyptians, they didn't accept the apology. So, even though Egypt might seem as the most peaceful and, in a way, loyal Arab country to Israel, because they respect their peace treaty, if the national security of Egypt will be threatened, if we'll have a sudden mass deportation of Palestinians towards Egypt, we should make sure that Egypt is going to enter into the war. Thank you. The last question, please, before we close.
Final question before the war.
Assalamualaikum. My name is Nasima Sheikh. So actually, I actually think that Iran is not, like, they are not on our side, because if you look what happened in Iraq, it's right now, I think it's controlled by America, but at the end of the day, it's controlled by Iran. I feel there are politicians in Iran that are actually very friendly with America, and they are, at the end of the day, they are not with the Palestinians or the Muslims. So that's my view, and I want to know the views, like your views as well, because I really think Iran is not on our side. They are just playing the game, they are just playing with words. I think they are not on our side. So I want to know.
I love conspiracy theories. I mean, I've been to Iran many times. I know Iran very well. Now, the thing is like this. Until the toppling of Saddam Hussein, the Arab world was very hostile towards Iran. Why? For many reasons. I mean, after the Islamic Revolution of Iran in 1979, the Anglo-Americans, they supported an extreme anti-Shia ideology in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia being the main country, where in a way they incited the ancient hatred between Sunnis and Shias. In a way, Saddam Hussein became the hero of Sunnism to fight the Safavids. Until his death, Saddam Hussein was cursing the Safavids. And when the civil war happened in Syria, the Arab Spring, Saudis and CIA, they sponsored Takfiri Daesh groups to fight and kill Shias. And it was the British Secret Service and the Americans. Now, this is a game that the Anglo-Americans have played since many years, especially since 1979, and is part of their game of divide and rule. So put the Sunnis to kill Shias, put the Arabs to kill Kurds, put the Kurds against the Arabs, and put the Turks against the Kurds. So this is what all the empires do and have done. Now, until the existence of a powerful Iraq, and of course during time of Gamal Abdel Nasser and time of Sadat before the peace treaty between Egypt and Israel, the people who defended and who were champions of the Palestinian issue were the Arabs, Arab nationalism. But what happened is that with the toppling of Saddam Hussein and with the peace treaty between Egypt and Israel, the Arabs, one after the other, they were defeated, either militarily or through treaties by Israel and the United States. So after 9/11, not 2001, but 1991, when the first Gulf War happened, and George W. Bush, the first, he announced in the US Congress the beginning of a new world order. What happened is that the Americans, in a systematic way, they destroyed all the secularist Arab regimes. The destruction of secular Arab regimes opened the field for the Shia militant Islam to take over the lead for the support of the Palestinians. So coming to your question, is Iran supporting Palestine? Yes. Are Iranians Sunnis like us? No, they are Shia. Why are the Iranians supporting the Palestinians? The answer is for theological reasons. The republic that Khomeini established in 1979, according to the Shia theology, they believe in the concept of Mahdiyat. So they believe that Iran is a state of Imam Mahdi. They are like the Zionists. Zionists believe in the Messianism. I mean, the reason why, and I mentioned during my presentation, I mean, Netanyahu is describing the war against Gaza now as the war against Amalek. So Muslim Imran is Amalek, he should be killed because he's the enemy of the Judeans. So what we have today in Palestine, we have the clash between two ideologies. The Zionist Messianism, where evangelical Christians believe that unless we defeat the fake religion of Muhammad, which is Islam, and we kill them, God will not forgive us, and he will not bring back Mashiach. Because Jews do not believe that Jesus was Messiah. They believe that Jesus was an impostor, and they say that we are still waiting for God to save us and bring the Mashiach. While on the other hand, Iranians believe that God will not bring back Imam Mahdi, who is the 12th Imam, who is hiding somewhere, and he has to come. I mean, we have two fundamentalist ideologies. I mean, two extremists. I mean, so on one hand, we have the Zionists, who they believe that they have to defeat Islam. On the other hand, you have the Shias, who are a minority. I mean, if you see, I mean, the majority, the Palestinians, they are Sunni. There are very, very few Shias. But they do believe that it is their holy duty to liberate Palestine from Dajjal and the Zionists, because they say only this way Imam Mahdi will come back to earth and he will bring peace in our planet. Now, when you talk about Iran, Iran is very complex. There are so many groups. I mean, if you go to Tehran, majority of people in Tehran, they're Kafirs. They openly hate Islam. Women remove the hijab, are not like here where Muslims love Islam. But you have a minority of mullahs who rule, and they believe that they are the representatives of Imam Mahdi. So it is a very complex situation, but to cut it short, if you follow the declarations of Netanyahu, or if you follow the history of the Prime Minister of Israel, Netanyahu, in 1990s he pushed the Americans against Iraq, against Libya, against Syria, because at first the enemy of the West was Sunni Islam, and they destroyed Sunni Islam. Now, if you follow his declarations and speeches, he he wants to destroy the Shia Islam. And the dream of the Armageddonists is to finally destroy Islam, Iran, because they see Hamas as a branch of Iranian, or what Iranians call the axis of resistance. Now, why did Hamas launch its attack against Israel on 7th of October? What was the name of the operation? Al-Aqsa Flood. Why? Because the Zionist rulers of Israel today, they believe that for God to forgive them, they have to destroy Masjid al-Aqsa and to build the Temple of Solomon. Now, Israel cannot destroy Masjid al-Aqsa for as long as Hamas and Hezbollah are there, but Hamas and Hezbollah are maintained by Iran. Iran pays them, it's open. Does Qatar pay Hamas? Yes. But Qatar pays only for reconstructing Gaza, giving salaries. Not a single bullet comes to Gaza from Qatar. So the regional hegemon or power, which in a way has allied itself with Sunni Islamic groups. Hamas is Sunni, is Muslim Brotherhood. Muslim Brotherhood, they were against the Alevis in Syria. They wanted to kill Bashar al-Assad. Ismail Haniyeh, he became enemy of Iran, who is the head of Hamas, because he supported the Sunni resistance and the uprising against Bashar al-Assad. But that is gone. At this moment, we have, in a way, a marriage between Sunni Islam and Shia Islam. There is a very good book by a British author. His name is Alistair Crook. His book is called Politics of Islamism. I suggest you to find that one. And he shows the influence that Iran is having, especially since 2006 in Gaza, on, in a way, taking over the Islamist movement, a movement which before was, in a way, championed by the Muslim Brotherhood. So, to cut it short, Iran is on the side of Palestine, but for its own theological reasons. Thank you. Any more comment?
My first question was not answered.
What was it?
Like, is there any relationship between Arab Israeli, like the status in Israel, like the Palestinian in what do you call it, the technical Palestinian, with the normalization of Arab states in Israel, like in terms of performing Hajj or Umrah or stuff like that? Because from my understanding, like Turkey, they try to protect the Jews in Turkey, the country. That's one of the reasons they always try to maintain normalization with Israel. So is there like such thing as well that has been going on to protect the interests of Israeli Arabs?
I won't delve in details into this, but I think almost all Muslim states who maintain relations with Israel come up with pretexts and excuses. So Turkey has this excuse: we want to maintain the Ottoman heritage in Jerusalem, so we need normalization. UAE will say we want to protect the Palestinians in the West Bank from annexation, so we normal. It's all pretexts. No Palestinian buys these excuses, but it's up to them. I mean, they are independent states; they have their own foreign policies. Good luck with them. Coming back to the question about are they on our side, or what is our side? Yes, that's important. It's important to look at it this way. I can dislike this person and also hate that person. This does not make these two people friends. That's very important. So some Sunnis, they really hate Iran, but at the same time they hate America. This does not make Iran and America friends. Yeah, logically speaking, maybe they should, but in reality, life is not as simple as that. It's not as straightforward as that. Sometimes I don't like this side and I don't like that side, and both of them don't like each other more than I hate the two of them. Coming back to Palestine, the Hezbollah enmity with Israel is real. I know some Muslims have this conspiracy theories that the whole 2006 war was actually just a theater. This is just acting. No, they talk inside in secret, because the same nonsense is said about Hamas sometimes. Hamas has not had any war with Israel for 2 years, since 2021. I hear even some Palestinians who believe in conspiracy theories. Oh, Hamas actually talks secretly to Israel. They just want to maintain peace and so on in Gaza. Then this war happened. in this ongoing war, how many shaheed martyrs from Jordan were killed in the war? Do you know? Zero.
The numbers?
Zero. How many shaheed from Turkey were killed in this war by Israel? Zero. How many? I'm not looking outside the Middle East. Let's stick to the Middle East. How many shaheed from Saudi Arabia in this war? Zero. How many shaheed from Hezbollah in this war? More than 50. More than 50. More than 50 fighters from Hezbollah were killed while fighting Israel. There is a daily skirmish, daily war taking place. This doesn't make me Shia. I'm a Sunni. I'm a proud Muslim. If I respect their sacrifices for their cause, for our cause, it doesn't make me Shia. And I don't want them also to, I'm not going to convert to Shia, and then I don't expect them to become Sunnis. It's up to them, their faith, like Ramadan, no compulsion in religion. Let them be whatever they want to be. But if you want to understand international politics, you have to realize that it's a totally different game from local politics or from daily friendships and so on. Russia is a Christian Orthodox state, probably run by an atheist elite. I don't know, Prof. Olsi knows better. But they are good friends with the mullahs of Iran, the religious Shia, and they don't mind actually working closely with some Sunni states. They are friends with the UAE. That makes it more complicated. Friends with Qatar as well. America is a Christian state, which used to be very close to Wahhabi Saudi Arabia. So very different religion. International politics is a totally different game. If you want to know which side are you in, or are you on, or are we on, always imagine a world war breaks out tomorrow. Which side is your country going to be on? And then you know which side you're on. Hopefully no world war breaks out, and hopefully if it breaks out, Muslim countries don't get involved. But if it breaks out tomorrow, countries of the Middle East, which side do you think Turkey will fight? Which side do you think Iran will fight? Which side do you think Egypt and Saudi Arabia will fight? It's important to always look at it this way. In comfortable, calm days, this doesn't arise. But in tense times, people pick sides. Thank you.
Okay, I would like to return to the question about the Sunni and Shia complexity. In foreign policy or international relations, it is always important to take a utilitarian understanding, practical understanding on what is going to happen and what immediate impact that one decision can make. In this context, we see Iran have actually shown a strong enthusiasm and motivation to liberate Palestine. Therefore, our foreign policy in one way or other should be around empowering that form of motivation. Though it should not be done directly because we are constantly under the surveillance of Uncle Sam. But there are many ways. Let me try to narrate one experience that I had as well when I was working with the British Embassy. Now, one of the senior diplomats asked me to draft a third-person note or diplomatic note to the Malaysian government saying that they have spotted an Iranian, oil tanker in Miri, Sarawak. And they also put like a long line of United Nations, barricade or blockade for Iranian oil into different countries because they intend to impose sanctions. So the diplomatic writing was, in a sense, stating back again the blockade and Malaysia's responsibility under certain aspect to also observe that form of decision that's been made. So the reply that we got, the reply that I saw from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs stating that they have not seen such because there was no number on the tanker. Therefore, they can't assume it is an Iranian ship that has actually docked at Miri. Now, looking from a Malaysian perspective, I can assume that Malaysia is going towards a more utilitarian approach. Now, even though we are Sunni and Shia, we are trying not to look into that form of schism, but we intend to look into the broader Muslim Ummah and other problems that probably with a more cohesive approach we can solve. If we engage into this form of Sunni Shia kind of approach, I mean, of course, there are differences. There are some extreme Shias who are totally different than what our teaching is. Okay, we have our own rightful way of doing things. Okay, but what is the immediate objective that we intend to achieve? And would this form of differences actually impact the relationship? So we need to look into more utilitarian or practical way of going forward with foreign policy, and I think that is what Malaysia or perhaps other countries are going forward to. Alright, thank you.
Okay, I know everyone wants to leave, me too, but the Fauzia too. Okay, but three things that came to mind while my colleagues were speaking. Number one, it's not just that Shia have extremists, Sunnis also have extremists, so remember that. Exactly. Now I forgot what the other two. Oh, again, I agree with Dr. Feroz that, especially when we look at Malaysia's foreign policy, the KL Summit 2019, Iran was here. So we are taking that approach that we are a larger Muslim community. And my final point, I agree with Dr. Olsi, don't fall under the Western way of doing things. They are doing this purposely, this schism to separate us, Sunni and Shia. And guess what? We are going along with it. How come? We don't like them, we are angry at them, but we're playing along when they're separating us into these two separate groups. So I think let's look beyond that. Going back to the exact question about Iran's role, let's see it this way. I mean, my colleagues have been talking about it, that Iran is working with Hamas via Hezbollah, even though we know one is Shia, one is Sunni. So if Iran can overlook that for the Palestinian cause, why can't we? So that's it. Thank you.